The good news about owning a commodity or being a commodity-based business is that you don't have to be extremely skilled in order to win. The more skilled you are, the more you will win. But frankly, you can suck and still be a good self-storage investor because people need self-storage, and especially if you're inside of the right markets. We're here to talk about you achieving financial freedom and why I think the best route to get to financial freedom is through self-storage investing. Whenever you're moving houses, when you're moving apartments, whether you're trying to clean out the garage, whatever it is, self-storage has a variety of different uses, and a lot of different people use self-storage. Anything from small lockers where people put spare books, spare clothes, very small units, all the way up to huge units that contractors use for storage of equipment, they use for storage of tools, they run their business out of it, and really, really large units where people park their boats, their RVs, other big vehicles and items inside of it. So self-storage is really a broad range of different product types and mixes, but at the end of the day, what we have is we have a concrete box with a metal building around it. Pretty primitive. You definitely couldn't live in there because there's no toilet, there's no internet, there's no anything like that inside these boxes. So self-storage is a really, really boring business, but it's also a really great investment. I got my financial freedom, broke through and achieved financial freedom through self-storage investing. And before I was doing self-storage investing, I was working for a mentor who did houses, rental houses, duplexes, fix and flips, wholesale properties, apartment complexes, did some of the commercial buildings, and we ran across self-storage, and it really just changed our business model altogether, his investment thesis, and it really changed the path of my life. We ran into a self-storage facility. This is the first self-storage facility I bought. Here's what it looked like before. We put not a lot of money, I wanna say maybe $20,000 or $25,000 into it, ended up making it look like this. Pretty much that was the first facility that I got started in and really learned the ins and outs in self-storage. So let's briefly talk about why is self-storage a great investment if you're trying to achieve financial freedom. Number one, very basic structure, okay? You know, a lot of people say they don't want to be landlords because they don't want to deal with tenants, toilets, or termites. Those are the 3 T's that people want to hate on in the real estate world. Well, guess what? We don't have anybody living in our property. We don't have any toilets. It's just a metal box where you store stuff. And we don't have any termites because it's metal. So self-storage is the same upside as normal real estate, but has less of the normal downsides that comes along with most traditional real estate like rental houses, apartments, and things like that. The good news about owning a commodity or being a commodity-based business is that you don't have to be extremely skilled in order to win. Frankly, you can suck and still be a good self-storage investor because people need self-storage, and especially if you're inside of the right market. A lot of people are worried about, oh, well, I don't know if I'm ready enough to take action and kind of get into this. I think I need to learn more. Listen, at the end of the day, we have a metal box that we're renting out to people. Not much can go wrong. Even if you're not that good, if you're just brand new, you can still have success. And then you can improve that business model as everybody's business model improves as you go forward and you learn more and more about the business. So let's talk about the other reasons of like, why is this, besides just being a metal box on some concrete, why is this better than other types of real estate? I'll give you an example, okay? The self-storage investment that I showed you earlier, whenever I first bought that property, there was nobody in it, okay? Absolutely nobody in it. It was 65 units, and there were about 15 doors on that, like the roll-up doors. The 15 doors were broken, and I paid about the price that you would pay for a house on that deal, right? So I knew that I was gonna have to do renovations in that property in order to bring it up to its maximum potential. But the other 80% of the units, as soon as I bought it, I could rent it out. So the cool thing is that I knew I had to do some renovations, but I could immediately start to generate income and revenue. That's critical for you to understand. The speed to implementing and generating revenue is crucial whenever you're trying to get to financial freedom, because every month that you don't generate additional income through your investments is a month that you're not getting closer. Compare that with, let's say I just went out and bought a $130,000 rental house that I knew that I was also gonna have to do $25,000 of improvements to. Well, guess what? I would not be able to rent out that rental house and start to generate income or revenue until I had all the renovations done because I only had one unit. And so the great thing about self-storage is that there's a lot of different units, and even on properties that need work, there's normally an opportunity for you to go in and start generating revenue immediately. And that really brings me around to point number 2, is that everything that you're gonna do to add value and renovate a property is gonna be done on the exterior of it. We're painting the facility, we're putting new cameras in the facility, we're putting a new gate on the facility, we're getting a new fence, we're adding new lighting. Almost all of your renovations that you're gonna be doing on a self-storage facility are exterior renovations in non-tenant rented spaces. And now that's really powerful for the sole reason of you can have tenants inside of your property paying you money, generating revenue while still performing your exterior renovation. And at the same time, on the apartment complex, you have to wait for each individual tenant to move out, and then you have to perform that renovation, which renovating an apartment complex, depending on the scope, could take anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months, right? Depending on how big of a renovation it is. And you can't do an interior renovation with a tenant living in there. I have never taken, in terms of a renovation, more than 1 month to renovate a self-storage facility. Because all that has to happen is I get a new gate, I paint the facility, I put cameras up, and all those things can be done relatively quickly with pretty much no downside or disturbance to my actual business. I'm just making my business better. Whenever we talk about a tenant, that means that the tenant has certain rights. So if you are renting out an apartment complex to somebody, that tenant has certain rights. The tenant rights are, if they don't pay their rent, you have to take them through eviction court. You're not allowed to access their unit without 48 hours of notice or whatever is written in the lease. You can only charge them, certain amounts. In some states, you can only raise their rents by so much. There's a lot of tenant rights that come along with renting a property, but we don't actually have tenants inside of self-storage. Sure, we have people occupy the space, but we're not governed by tenant laws. We actually have people storing stuff, and therefore we're governed by lien laws, okay? So if I have somebody in an apartment who doesn't pay me, I have to take them to eviction court. If I have somebody in a self-storage unit who does not pay me, I don't have to take them to court. I don't have to serve them an eviction notice. What I do is I run them through a lien law process, which is where I send them a notice that they're delinquent, and if they don't pay me and they don't respond, I can sell their stuff in an auction, and then I can get that unit empty and I can rent it out again. So it's really powerful because one of the biggest risks, especially if you're buying in a state that's very protective of their tenants, is if one tenant doesn't pay you and you have to evict them, and I don't know, let's say something crazy happens, maybe something like what happened in 2020 to where they quit evicting people. What do you do on your journey to financial freedom? It's a huge risk of a tenant not paying you, the courts not doing evictions, and you just being high and dry, right? You still gotta pay your mortgage, you still gotta pay your property taxes, you gotta pay your insurance, but your tenant's not paying you. Well, the good news is, even in what happened in 2020, there was no hiccups in the lien law process, which means that even though other landlords couldn't evict their tenants, self-storage owners, for people who were delinquent, could still get rid of those. And because of that, even in what happened in 2020, self-storage delinquencies did not really go up. We didn't see any of our delinquencies going up because people couldn't pay, and it was just really positive, while a bunch of other people were, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do as landlords? Self-storage owners were cool, calm, and collected. So that's a huge benefit. We abide by lien laws, not tenant protection laws. The next reason that I think self-storage is the best investment to get you to financial freedom is because the way the leases are structured, okay? So in other, again, I just keep saying apartments, rental houses, offices, whatever, most of the time you're signing a 12-month lease, right? 12 months or more. In office and industrial spaces, sometimes you sign 5, 10, 15, 20-year leases. Self-storage leases are almost always exclusively month to month. Okay, no matter really what kind of an income area you're in. The other thing that I can think of that's month to month is sometimes mobile home parks, but you're dealing with a certain clientele. And whenever you get into month to month on the residential side, normally it has has a negative connotation, and normally investors who look at potentially buying those properties will view that as inherently more risky and will not pay you as low of a cap rate, or AKA as high as a price for the income stream. But in self-storage, it's the industry standard. You could have one in Beverly Hills and it's still gonna be month to month, and investors don't worry about that. The benefit of having a month to month lease is if you ever need to raise your rent because you're behind market, if you need to change policies within your lease, you can do that at any time because you're, I'll call it a client, right? A client who rents a self-storage from you. I don't want to use the word tenant because of what we just talked about, but the client who rents from you, they're generally protected and they can have all these rights. And if they have 12 months as a tenant, well, the clients now, they only have 30 days of protection. And what I mean by protection is it's not like we're constantly raising the rents on our tenant every single month, but we can do things where if we inherited a property, if we went out and bought a property from an owner and all of the tenants there had really low rates, then you could come in and you don't have to wait for all of their leases to expire. The next month you can just say, hey, listen, tenants, you've been getting one hell of a deal for the last 5 years. You know, the gravy train stops here. You've been paying $50 for a $100 unit. I'm moving your rent to $90 and you're still gonna get a deal, right? And by the way, I'm gonna raise your rent to $90 and I'm gonna paint the facility, add a security system. I'm gonna do all those great things and you're gonna be happy about it, or you can choose to move out and I'll re-lease the space. And that's what's so great about 30-day leases is that you don't have to wait that extended amount of time in order to do so. Now, it also comes with the downside of people do literally sometimes just rent from 1 month and move out. And so your income is bound to change and go up and down. But it's really more of a positive than is a negative. And the way that you combat that, well, how do I know if all my tenants are gonna move out 1 month? They're not going to, right? And the biggest way that you can make sure and check this with yourself is to go through and understand the market. So if you want to understand the market, here's what you need to know. Again, we talked about this earlier. Self-storage is a commodity. There's only so much self-storage that's needed inside of any given market, okay? How do we define a market? I live in Atlanta. Atlanta is a big town, right? To get from one side of Atlanta to the other, it's sometimes a 45-minute drive, right? So whenever I think about the market of Atlanta, do I think about, how much does the city of Atlanta have in terms of self-storage? I don't think about that, and neither should you. Here's how you should think about it. Self-storage serves a radius, right? A circle. So if you were to pick a point on the map and you were to draw a radius around that, there are really 3 different radiuses that you need to think about. The first one is 1 mile, which means from this point of the circle to this point of the circle is a 1 mile distance, and then that would make a circle, right? All the way around it would be 1 mile. That's the most immediate market that you're serving. You want to look at how many square feet per capita, right? Square feet per person of storage there is. Now, there's a lot of debate in the self-storage industry. The general rule of thumb that I've heard is 9 square feet per capita, which means that if inside of that 1 mile radius you had, let's say 10,000 people, you take 10,000 times 9, and that would be 90,000, okay? That's how many square feet of self-storage that 1 mile radius needs. Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, how would I even go about calculating that? Well, I'm glad you asked. There's this really cool website that I'll plug. It's called Radius Plus. I'll link the description below, link the website in the description below, and you can go check it out. They give you 5 hours of search time, absolutely free. So if you want to check that out, go do it. You can go and you can look at any location. It'll tell you how many square feet of storage are in this area, okay? So that's how you find out. But again, 1 miles can tend to be really oversaturated, which means if you were to go look at the 1 mile, the reason that it's really oversaturated is because, let's say maybe all the storage in that town, the zoning has only been allowed in this one part of town. Self-storage is only allowed in this one part of town. So all of the self-storage is located there, and you may find out that this is a really commercial sector where not a lot of people live. And so therefore, the square foot per capita may be like 30 square feet per capita, and you go, oh my gosh, it's way overvalued. So then what you have to do is you have to zone out. Instead of looking at a 1 mile radius around the property, you have to look at a 3 mile radius around the property, and that should give you a more accurate picture. And most people even look it up to 5 miles around the property and go to a bigger and bigger radius. The point being here, I found, and I've surveyed my tenants, and I found that most of my tenants live within 2.8 miles of my property. And so I'm a bigger fan of the 3-mile radius than I am the 5-mile radius. But the point being is that if you're gonna go and you go, well, I'm so worried about my tenants moving out and if I raise the rents on them, or I'm so worried about the short-term 30 days, month-to-month leases that all my tenants may just evaporate. As long as you're in a good market, as long as you're in a good 3 or 5 mile radius, as long as you're at the 9 square feet or below, there's always gonna be somebody who needs your product, right? Now, things that could come along is if somebody else builds a new one and oversaturates your market, that could be a problem. That could soften your rents, make your rents go down. But generally, it's a good thing. A lot of people panic whenever a brand new storage facility comes in next door to them, because most of the time, a brand new self-storage facility is going to need to charge higher rents to make a good business model, and that can actually end up bringing your income up once they get leased up. So, can be a good thing, but it's always good to stay in touch with your market. I hope that makes sense. This was a general overview of why I think self-storage is a really powerful investment. Oh yeah, wait a second, I almost forgot. Almost none of that matters unless you know that you're buying the deal at a good price. You could buy it in a great market. You could not suck at business. You could do everything right. But if you don't buy it at the right price, that is a huge factor in your success of self-storage. So I just want to make sure as you go forward, if you need to know how to analyze and make sure you're buying at a good price, I have that video and you can check it out by clicking right here. See you guys in that video.